My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 28 years old, and I used to believe that talent alone could earn respect. It took me years to learn that success means nothing when the people closest to you have already decided you're a joke. When I was little, my mom used to hang my drawings on the fridge, and my dad used to take them down. "No offense, Claire," he'd say, "but the world doesn't pay for crayons." He was a practical man, a numbers guy. He ran a small construction business in our Midwestern town, Donovan and Sons. The "and Sons" part always bothered me because there was only one son, my older brother, Ryan. Ryan was everything I wasn't: loud, confident, a natural at shaking hands and closing deals. He started managing the books for Dad's company before he could legally buy beer. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one who stayed up painting till 3 a.m., smearing color across cheap canvas while everyone slept. By the time I turned 18, I knew I wanted to study fine arts. When I got my acceptance letter from the University of Chicago's art program, I thought my parents would be proud. I still remember walking into the kitchen holding the envelope like it was a golden ticket. Mom smiled faintly, but Dad just sighed. "Art," he said. "You could have gone into accounting, engineering, something with structure. What are you going to do with art?" "Make something beautiful," I said. He laughed once, short and sharp. "Beauty doesn't pay the bills, Claire." Ryan leaned against the fridge, smirking. "She'll probably end up painting those live, laugh, love signs for Etsy moms." Mom told him to stop, but she didn't disagree. I told myself I didn't care. But that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if they were right. College was both heaven and hell. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who got it. The way colors could speak, the way silence could feel heavy on a canvas. But even as I found my creative voice, guilt followed me like a ghost. Every phone call home was the same. "Dad, still doing your little art thing?" "Mom, you eating okay?" "Ryan, my business professor said people like you end up teaching kids who don't listen." I learned to stop calling. By senior year, I had a small studio space downtown and a part-time job framing photos. I was broke, but happy. That's also when I met Ethan. Ethan worked at the coffee shop below my studio. He was tall, charismatic, and obsessed with success. He studied marketing and called himself an entrepreneur, even though his biggest venture was selling sneakers online. Still, he was charming, and when you're 21 and hungry for someone to believe in you, charm feels a lot like love. At first, he was supportive. He'd watch me paint and say things like, "You're incredible, babe. You're gonna blow up someday." But as months passed, his tone shifted. When I couldn't afford dinner out, he'd joke, "Guess exposure doesn't pay, huh?" When I sold a small watercolor for $200, he said, "That's cute." My friend made that much flipping a phone on eBay. I told myself he didn't mean it, that it was his way of teasing. But little by little, his words started to sound just like my father's. Graduation day came with both pride and dread. My name was announced, I walked across the stage, and when I looked for my family, their row was empty. No one came. They said they were busy with Ryan's expansion project. After the ceremony, I stood outside the auditorium watching other families take pictures. I remember clutching my degree so tightly that the edges bent. My professor, Dr. Lanning, found me there. "Claire, where's your family?" "They couldn't make it," I said, forcing a smile. He studied me for a moment, then said gently, "Sometimes the ones who see least are the ones closest to us. You've got something rare, don't let their blindness become yours." That sentence burned itself into my mind. 2 years later, I was living in a small apartment downtown, scraping by on freelance illustration gigs. I wasn't rich, but I was doing what I loved. Ethan and I had moved in together, though things between us were tense. He'd started a job at a tech startup and suddenly spoke in buzzwords I didn't understand. One night, his friends came over for dinner, young guys in blazers who talked about crypto, investments, and scaling companies. I made pasta, hoping to feel included. Halfway through dinner, one of them asked, "So, Claire, what do you do?" I smiled. "I'm an artist. I design for magazines and commissions." Ethan laughed before I could finish. "She means she paints pretty things and hopes someone buys them." The table erupted in laughter. My face went hot. I tried to laugh it off, but something inside me cracked. Later that night, when his friends had gone, I asked, "Why did you say that?" He looked at me like I was overreacting. "Babe, relax. It was a joke. You take everything so personally. Because you embarrass me in front of everyone."
"Come on," he said.
"They all know you're talented. But let's be real, you're not exactly changing the world with watercolors." That night, I slept on the couch. A month later, my family threw a party for Ryan. He'd just been named Young Businessman of the Year by the local Chamber of Commerce. Ethan wanted to go. "I haven't seen your parents in forever," he said. "Maybe they'll finally stop giving you grief." I didn't want to go, but part of me wanted to prove I wasn't a failure. When we arrived, the house was packed. My dad was shaking hands, my mom serving wine, and Ryan stood by the fireplace, smiling in his tailored suit. When he saw me, he grinned. "Hey, Picasso. Haven't gone broke yet."
People laughed.
Ethan laughed too. I forced a smile. Still surviving. Ryan motioned toward a giant framed article on the wall, a newspaper spread about his company's success. "Real success comes with numbers, sis. You should try it sometime." I opened my mouth, but my father cut in. "Let it go, Claire.
He's right.
You're bright, but you chose a road that leads nowhere. You're 26. Maybe it's time to get serious." "Serious?" I repeated. "I am serious." Ethan chuckled softly beside me.
"They're not wrong, babe.
"You could do more with your talent if you learned to sell it." The laughter, the condescension, the smug faces, it all blurred into one humiliating haze. I set my drink down, stood up, and said, "Excuse me." No one stopped me. I walked out of the house, into the cold night, and sat in my car shaking. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hit something, but instead, I just whispered to myself, "You're not wrong."
They are.
That was the night I decided I wouldn't waste another second trying to convince small minds of big dreams. The next morning, I applied for a fellowship in New York. It was a long shot, a prestigious art and design program sponsored by a top creative firm. Thousands applied every year. Only 6 were chosen. I didn't think I'd get in, but I did. 2 months later, I was packing my bags while Ethan stood in the doorway, scowling. "So, you're just leaving?" "Yes," I said. "For once, I'm choosing myself."
He scoffed.
"You'll be back in a year, broke and lonely." I smiled faintly. "If I am, at least it'll be on my terms." That was the last time I saw him. New York was terrifying at first. I lived in a shared apartment with 2 other fellows, surviving on instant noodles and long hours. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was where I belonged. Every day was a blur of color and creation, murals, digital installations, charity art for underfunded schools. I worked until my hands cramped, until the ache in my chest was replaced by something stronger, purpose. Years passed quickly. I went from assistant to lead designer, then creative director for a global design agency. My work began appearing in exhibitions on magazine covers, even in Times Square campaigns. And then one morning, an email arrived. "Dear Ms. Donovan, we are honored to inform you that you've been selected as the recipient of the Distinguished Alumna Award from the University of Chicago School of Fine Arts. We would be thrilled if you would attend as our keynote speaker." I stared at the screen for a long time, trembling. The ceremony would be held in my hometown, the same town where they'd laughed. That night, as I looked out over the New York skyline, I whispered, "You called it pointless. Let's see what pointless can do." I didn't know then just how poetic that ceremony would become. Because fate, it seemed, wasn't done with irony yet. The plane touched down in my hometown just after noon on a gray Thursday. I hadn't been back in almost 6 years, but as soon as the wheels hit the runway, the memories came rushing back like a wave that had been waiting to crash. The small airport looked the same vending machines, same faded posters for the local rodeo, same smell of burnt coffee. It was strange how a place could stay frozen while you'd spent years breaking apart and rebuilding yourself. I stepped off the plane in a long beige coat, carrying a leather satchel instead of my old art bag. My hair was neater, my shoes newer, and my heart heavier than I'd expected. The University of Chicago School of Fine Arts had booked me a room at a nearby hotel, but the ceremony was 2 days away. That meant 2 long days in the town where everyone once told me I'd fail. When I picked up the rental car, I hesitated before entering the old neighborhood. Every street sign felt like a ghost calling me by name. Our family house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees now bare for winter. The driveway was freshly paved. Ryan's doing, no doubt. A shiny black SUV sat out front. I parked across the street and stared through the windshield for a long time. I almost didn't go in. I could have driven away, gone straight to the hotel, avoided all of it. But some part of me needed to stand on that porch again to see if the walls still held the echoes of who I used to be. When I finally rang the doorbell, it was Ryan who opened the door. He froze, blinking. "Claire?" "Hi," I said, trying to smile. He laughed once, surprised. "Well, this is unexpected." "What? The big city got boring?" I ignored the jab. "I'm in town for an event. Thought I'd stop by." He leaned against the frame, smug as ever. "Still doing your art thing?" "Still," I said evenly. "You?" He grinned. "Running 3 divisions now. Expansion's tough, but someone's gotta lead." Behind him, I heard Mom's voice. "Ryan, who is it?" When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Oh my lord, Claire." She hugged me before I could react, and for a brief second, I smelled the same lavender detergent she'd always used. But when she stepped back, her eyes scanned me like she was measuring distance. "You look different." "New York does that," I said. Dad came out from the kitchen, slower than I remembered, his hair grayer. He stopped when he saw me, face unreadable. "Claire." "Hi, Dad." A pause stretched between us until Mom awkwardly said, "Well, don't just stand there. Come in, honey." I followed her into the living room. It was immaculate. New furniture, updated decor, family photos lining the mantel. There were pictures of Ryan's kids, his wife in front of their lake house, Dad holding a Business of the Year award. Not a single trace of me. I glanced around and asked softly, "You redecorated?" Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted a fresh start." Fresh start. Translation: we erased you. Ryan's wife, Hannah, came downstairs then, still picture-perfect with her highlighted hair and polite smile.
"Claire, wow.
Long time." "Yeah," I said. Mom ushered me toward the kitchen. Sit. I'll make tea." Ryan followed, crossing his arms. "So, what brings you back? Art convention? Workshop?" "I was invited for an award ceremony," I said. Dad raised an eyebrow. "An award?" "From my alma mater. They're honoring alumni who've made significant contributions in their field." Ryan chuckled. "They must have been short on candidates." I forced a smile. "Apparently not." Mom's voice trembled as she poured tea. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What kind of contribution?" "I'm creative director at a design firm. We lead social campaigns for education and community outreach. One of our projects was recently adopted nationally." Ryan whistled low. "Big words for posters and paint." "Ryan," Mom warned, but she didn't sound firm. Dad sipped his tea. "Well, we're glad you're doing all right." I set my cup down. "I'm doing more than all right." The room went quiet. Ryan finally muttered, "Guess we'll see if your little art degree actually paid off." And that was the moment it hit me. Nothing had changed. 6 years had passed, but in this house, time had stopped right where it had broken. I stood up. "I should go. I just wanted to say hello." Mom's voice softened. "Will you come by again before you leave?" "I'll try," I said, already knowing I wouldn't. As I walked out the door, Ryan called after me. "Hey, Claire, don't forget to bring your paintbrush to the ceremony. Might come in handy." I didn't look back. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed staring at my reflection in the black TV screen. My chest burned with the familiar ache of humiliation. I thought I was over it. I thought I'd built a life so solid that their words couldn't touch me. But there I was again, that same girl at the dinner table, small and dismissed. I picked up my phone and opened the email about the ceremony. My name looked foreign on the official letterhead. Keynote speaker, Claire Donovan, creative director, Whitestone Studios, New York. Underneath, the list of attendees included Donovan and Sons Construction, sponsorship tier, silver. My fingers tightened around the phone. They were going to be there. The next day, I visited the university for a sound check and program briefing. The event hall was stunning. White drapery, soft lighting, the stage lined with paintings from alumni. At the center of the display was one of my own pieces. The Distance Between. I hadn't seen it in years. I painted it during my fellowship, an abstract depiction of two figures standing on opposite cliffs, separated by a glowing canyon. It had been featured in several exhibitions, but here in my hometown, it suddenly felt different. The event coordinator, a cheerful woman named Megan, greeted me with a warm handshake. Claire, we're so honored to have you. Everyone's been buzzing about your speech.
Speech.
I blinked. You mean the acceptance note? Oh no, she said, smiling. You're our keynote speaker. You'll close the ceremony after the awards. Didn't you read the full invite? My heart skipped. I must have missed that part. Megan laughed. Well, you'll do great. Your story's incredible, from small-town dreamer to international creative leader. You're exactly what this place needs to see. Her words stayed with me long after she left. What this place needs to see. That evening I took a walk downtown. The same cracked sidewalks, same diner, same tired neon signs. But something in me had shifted. It wasn't the town that was small, it was the way I'd let it make me feel. As I passed the diner window, I caught my reflection beside a newspaper headline taped to the glass. Donovan and Sons Construction expands to 3rd County. Ryan's photo was underneath, smiling. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just softly. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't need to outrun them. I'd already outgrown them. The day of the ceremony arrived bright and cold. The hotel valet pulled up my car while I adjusted my coat. My hair was styled, my badge clipped to my blazer, my name gleaming in bold print. Keynote speaker, Claire Donovan. When I arrived, the lobby buzzed with chatter. Local business owners, alumni, sponsors, everyone was there. And among them, standing near the refreshment table, was my family. Ryan spotted me first. His eyes widened when he saw the placard in my hand. He smirked. Well, look who's presenting the trophies. Did they need volunteers? Before I could reply, Megan appeared beside me, smiling brightly. Claire, there you are. We're just about to start rehearsal for your keynote. Ryan's smile faltered. Keynote? Megan nodded. Yes, Miss Donovan's our headline speaker. You've heard her story, right? It's so inspiring. She turned to me, lowering her voice. Your segment will close the evening. Everyone's been looking forward to it. I smiled at Ryan, polite but sharp. Guess I'm still painting after all. He said nothing. When I turned away, I caught Dad watching from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. Mom's eyes darted between us, nervous. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear or shame. I felt calm. They were here, yes. But this time, they weren't the ones watching me fail. This time, they have to watch me shine. That night, as I rehearsed my speech alone in the hotel mirror, I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't need to humiliate them. I just needed to tell the truth, and let the truth do the work. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success that doesn't need to shout. The night of the ceremony arrived draped in soft snow. It wasn't the heavy, angry kind that blotted out the world. It was the quiet kind, the one that falls gently, as if the sky's trying to apologize for something. The event hall glowed against the cold, a glass building filled with golden light. Cars lined the entrance, people wrapped in coats and chatter. I stepped out of the car, the crunch of snow under my heels, and for a moment I just stood there, breathing in the crisp air. My breath came out in small clouds, and for the first time in years, I felt steady. Inside, music played low, a soft string quartet under murmuring conversation. Waiters moved between clusters of alumni, faculty, and guests carrying trays of champagne. The stage at the far end of the hall shimmered under warm spotlights. The banner above it read, University of Chicago, Alumni Honors Gala. I found my table near the front. My name, Claire Donovan, was printed on a thick white card, embossed with gold. Next to it, my title, Creative Director, Whitestone Studios, New York. I hadn't sat down before I heard a voice I could recognize in my sleep. Claire. I turned. My father stood behind me, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. He was wearing the same dark suit he always wore to big events, the same one that smelled faintly of cologne and sawdust. Hi, Dad, I said softly. He gave a single nod. You look well. So do you. He looked around the glittering room, the chandeliers reflecting in his eyes. Quite the place. They must think a lot of you. I guess they do. Before he could reply, my mother appeared beside him, clutching a small purse. Claire, honey, you look beautiful. I can't believe, well, I can, but it's just, this is wonderful. I smiled gently. Thank you, Mom. Ryan and Hannah arrived next, arm in arm, both dressed like they owned the building. Ryan gave a low whistle. Keynote speaker, huh? You really turned this into something. I told you I would, I said. He chuckled, but I caught the flicker of something else in his eyes. Not amusement, unease. As dinner began, I focused on the speakers ahead of me, half listening as awards were presented to professors, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs. Between courses, polite applause rose and fell like waves. I tried to enjoy it, but part of me couldn't ignore the tension at our table. Ryan made small talk with a sponsor beside him. Hannah scrolled her phone. Dad fidgeted with his napkin. I caught him glancing at me occasionally, like he was trying to reconcile the woman before him with the daughter he'd dismissed years ago. When the dessert plates were cleared, the lights dimmed slightly. The event coordinator, Megan, stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. And now, she said, for our final recognition of the evening, our distinguished alumna and keynote speaker. The room quieted. This year's recipient has shown that creativity and vision can change not only how we see art, but how art can transform lives. Her work in design has reached global audiences, blending storytelling, education, and social change. Please welcome Claire Donovan. Applause thundered through the hall. I stood, smoothing my blazer, and walked toward the stage. The spotlight felt warm on my skin. I glanced briefly toward my family as I passed their table. Ryan's smirk had faded. Dad looked stunned. Mom clutched her hands together, eyes wide and wet. I reached the podium. For a second, I let the applause die down, let the silence settle. My heart pounded, but my voice came out steady. Good evening. Dozens of faces looked up at me, former professors, classmates, strangers, and, somewhere among them, the people who once told me my dream was worthless. I never thought I'd be standing here, I began. When I graduated from this university, I walked out those doors believing my degree would make people proud of me. Instead, I went home and heard words that nearly broke me. They called it pointless. They said I'd starve, that I was wasting my potential. The audience was still listening. I believed them for a while. I tried to fit into other people's definitions of success. But here's the truth I wish someone had told me back then. Art isn't just paint or clay or design. It's the language of everything we build, everything we dream, everything we fight for. It's how we say, I exist. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My voice grew stronger. I was told my degree wouldn't get me anywhere. But what they didn't know is that art was never meant to get me anywhere. It was meant to show me who I was. And that discovery, that courage to keep creating even when no one claps, that's what saved me. I paused, glancing at the audience, then at the front table where my family sat. I stand here tonight not because I proved them wrong, but because I stopped needing to. Every time someone told me to give up, I painted through it. Every time someone mocked my work, I turned it into fuel. And every time I doubted myself, I remembered that even the smallest light can't be unseen once it burns. I took a deep breath. So, To anyone who's ever been told their dream is silly, that their passion doesn't matter, let me say this. There will be people who laugh, who dismiss, who try to measure your worth by their rulers. Don't shrink to fit them. Outgrow them. Outwork them. Outlast them. And one day, they'll have to sit in the audience while you take the stage. The hall erupted in applause. Not polite applause, real, thunderous, heartfelt applause. People stood, clapping, cheering. Some even whistled. From the corner of my eye, I saw my father stand slowly, almost mechanically, joining in. My mother wiped her eyes. Ryan didn't move. He just stared, frozen, his fork untouched. I smiled, bowed my head slightly, and stepped back from the microphone. After the ceremony, people surrounded me, professors, sponsors, students. They shook my hand, took photos, asked questions. I smiled, thanked them, posed for pictures. I was floating, somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief. When the crowd began to thin, I stepped outside to breathe. The snow had picked up again, flakes swirling under the streetlights like confetti. I stood there for a while, letting the cold touch my face, when I heard the door open behind me. Claire. It was my father. He walked toward me slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders bent slightly under the weight of years, or maybe regret. That speech, he said quietly, you really meant all that? Every word, I said. He nodded, jaw tight. You did good, kid. Real good. For a moment, that was all. But then he added, his voice cracking just slightly, I was wrong about you. I turned toward him.
No, Dad.
You were wrong about art. He stared at me for a long moment, then let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Guess I was. We stood there in silence, watching the snow. When I finally looked at him again, I said softly, I wanted you to see that I was never wasting my life. I just wasn't living the one you wanted for me. He nodded again, eyes glistening. I see that now. He didn't hug me, Dad was never good at that, but he put a hand on my shoulder, firm and warm. It was the first time he'd touched me like that since I was a child. Inside, I found Mom near the coat rack. She threw her arms around me. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I can't believe I ever doubted you. I hugged her back, whispering, It's okay, Mom. You just didn't understand. From across the room, I caught Ryan's gaze. He stood with a drink in his hand, his wife beside him, face stiff with discomfort. He gave me a short nod, then turned away. It didn't matter. For the first time, I didn't need him to clap. I didn't need him to see me, because finally, I saw me. That night, when I returned to the hotel, I placed the Crystal Award on the desk beside my suitcase. It wasn't the trophy that mattered. It was the silence it left in its wake. The silence where doubt used to live. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked out the window at the town lights below. Somewhere out there, my family was heading home, their conversations quieter than before. I wondered what Ryan was saying now. I wondered if he realized that the sister he once mocked had just surpassed him in ways no plaque could measure. But even that thought faded quickly, replaced by something gentler, peace. Because in the end, revenge hadn't brought me here. Faith had. Faith in my art, in my purpose, in myself. And as I turned off the lamp, I whispered the words that carried me through every cruel joke, every lonely night, every moment of doubt. Pointless? Not anymore. The morning after the ceremony, sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains like a quiet applause that hadn't stopped overnight. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a knot in my stomach. The fear, the defensiveness, the constant urge to prove myself, it had all melted away somewhere between my speech and that long, silent drive back to the hotel. The awards still sat on the nightstand, catching the morning light. It wasn't big or flashy, just a smooth glass shape with my name engraved in silver, but I couldn't stop staring at it. Not because of what it meant to others, but because of what it meant to me, that all those nights of doubt, loneliness, and quiet perseverance had finally built something solid. I brewed a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the small balcony. The town looked peaceful under a fresh coat of snow. Somewhere down those winding streets were all the versions of me I'd been, The scared college graduate, the humiliated daughter, the girl who used to paint until her fingers cramped just to remember who she was. And for the first time, I didn't hate her. My phone buzzed on the table. I expected messages from colleagues or the university. Instead, the first text made my breath catch. Dad, proud of you. Mom says breakfast. I smiled despite myself. I typed back.
Sure.
9 a.m. at the diner? The diner hadn't changed in 10 years. Same green booths, same chrome counter, same smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee. When I walked in, Mom waved from a corner booth. She looked nervous and relieved at the same time. Dad sat beside her, stirring his coffee as if concentrating on the act itself. I slid into the seat across from them. Morning. Mom smiled, her eyes still a little red. We watched your speech again online this morning. It was beautiful, Claire. Just beautiful. Thank you, I said. Dad didn't look up. They posted it already? Of course they did, Mom said, swatting his arm lightly. It's already got thousands of views. He nodded slowly, then looked at me. That firm you work for? Whitestone, right? That's a big deal? It's global, I said. We have offices in London and Singapore now. Damn, he muttered under his breath. It wasn't quite admiration, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was something in between, something closer to realization. Mom leaned forward, hands clasped. Your father and I were talking last night. We didn't make it easy on you, did we? I met her gaze. No, you didn't. She nodded, eyes softening. We just wanted you to be safe. Stable. Your brother's always been the practical one, but you, she hesitated, searching for the right word. You always had that fire. I guess we were scared it would burn you instead of light the way. I let out a small laugh, though my eyes stung. It did both, Mom. Dad cleared his throat. We're proud of you, Claire. You've done more than we thought possible. There it was, the apology. Not in so many words, but in the language my father spoke best. Acknowledgement. Thank you, I said quietly. We sat there a while longer, talking about the ceremony, my work, little things that didn't feel heavy. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not entirely, but it was the beginning of it. After breakfast, I decided to visit the community arts center near the old downtown square. When I was in high school, it was a rundown warehouse with peeling paint and broken windows. But now, to my surprise, it had been renovated. Bright murals on the outside, polished wood floors inside. A young woman at the front desk recognized me from the event. Oh my God, you're Claire Donovan. I watched your speech last night. I smiled, a little shyly. That's me. She grinned. You inspired half of our art students. They've been talking about you all morning. I looked around. Paintings lined the walls, student work, community projects, mixed media pieces. It felt like walking through the heartbeat of everything I'd fought for. Do you still take volunteers? I asked. Always, she said. I left my number. It felt like something had come full circle, like a bridge had quietly built itself between the past and the present without me realizing it. That afternoon, I met with a few former professors for coffee at the university. They asked about New York, about the creative industry, about mentorship. Dr. Lanning, the same professor who once found me crying outside graduation, sat across from me with a proud smile. I always knew you had it, Claire. You just needed time to let the noise fade. The noise? I asked. The people who didn't see you clearly, he said. The world is full of them. The trick is learning to see yourself anyway. I nodded slowly. I think I finally did. Before we parted, he handed me a small envelope. A little something from the department, he said. Inside was a letter offering me a visiting lectureship, a short-term artist-in-residence position to teach workshops to the next graduating class. I stared at it, speechless. I don't know what to say. He smiled. Say yes. That night, I sat by the hotel window again, the award beside me and the letter in my lap. The city lights blinked faintly in the distance. I thought about what it would mean to come back, to teach, to give something to the place that once gave me so much pain. It felt strange, the idea of returning not as the disappointed daughter or the mocked graduate, but as the mentor I once wished I had.
My phone buzzed again.
Ryan, heard you're some kind of local celebrity now.
Congrats.
I stared at the message for a long time. No sarcasm. No teasing. Just acknowledgement. I typed back. Thanks. We all grow up eventually. He didn't reply. And for once, that was okay. A week later, I returned to New York. My studio window overlooked the Hudson River, gray and glittering in the winter sun. The awards sat on a shelf beside my paints and sketchbooks. Life picked up again quickly, meetings, deadlines, campaigns. But something in me had changed. I found myself smiling more, speaking with confidence instead of apology. The voice that once trembled in defense now stood tall in conviction. My assistant, Nora, noticed it one afternoon during a project meeting. You seem different, she said. I think I've finally closed a chapter, I replied. She grinned. About time. That weekend, I received a video from the art center back home. It showed a group of children painting a mural on a large outdoor wall. The message read, "Inspired by your story, we started a program for kids who dream of becoming artists. Thank you, Claire." As I watched the video, tears filled my eyes. The mural was simple, bright colors, shapes of hands reaching toward the sky, but it meant everything. Because for all the applause, awards, and recognition, this was the true measure of success, planting something that would keep growing long after I was gone. A month later, I returned to the university as a guest lecturer. The auditorium was filled with young faces, wide-eyed, nervous, hopeful. I stood at the podium, looking out over them, and smiled. When I was your age, I began, I thought success meant proving everyone wrong. But it's not about that. It's about proving yourself right, believing in the voice that no one else can hear until you make it loud enough to echo. Afterward, a student approached me. She was shy, clutching a sketchbook. Ms. Donovan, my parents keep telling me art's a waste of time, that I should do something practical. I knelt slightly so we were eye level. Let them think that, I said, and then show them what they could never imagine. She smiled through tears. As she walked away, I realized that the words I'd given her were the same ones I'd needed all those years ago. And somehow, saying them now out loud, with certainty, healed something deep that I hadn't even known was still open. That night, as the sun set over the frozen campus, I walked past the art building one last time. Inside, students worked late, laughter spilling through open windows. The scent of paint and turpentine carried through the cold air, familiar and comforting. I stopped by the wall where graduates' plaques were displayed. Near the center was mine. Small, silver, engraved with just my name. No title, no quote. Just Claire Donovan. It was enough. Because in the end, my story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about return. Return to myself. Return to purpose. Return to peace. As I stepped into the falling snow, I whispered one last time. Not to them, not to the past, but to the girl who never stopped painting, even when no one believed she should. You did it. The months that followed felt like sunlight after a long storm. My life in New York bloomed in ways I never expected. My designs were featured in international campaigns. My name started circulating in industry magazines, and speaking invitations came from places I'd only dreamed of. Yet what made me happiest wasn't the fame. It was watching other artists find their voice because of something I'd said or built or started. I'd begun mentoring a group of young designers, some from small towns, some from overseas. Many of them reminded me of myself. Stubborn, scared, and hungry for someone to say, "Keep going." Each time I looked at them, I saw flashes of that 20-year-old girl who once painted in a freezing dorm room with trembling hands and unshakable hope. One evening, I sat at my studio desk reviewing portfolio drafts when my assistant, Nora, knocked on the door. "You've got an email," she said, leaning against the frame. "From the Global Arts Foundation." I frowned. "The one based in London?" She nodded, grinning. "They're inviting you to keynote their international summit next month. And they want you to lead a global mentorship initiative.
Paid.
Full funding. Travel included." I blinked, trying to process it. They what? Nora laughed. Claire, they're basically asking you to shape the next generation of creatives around the world. This is huge. I sat back, heart racing. A few years ago, I couldn't afford rent. Now the world was asking for my story. But as the initial excitement faded, a flicker of doubt crept in. A voice that sounded eerily like my father's whispered, "Are you sure you can handle that?" I silenced it the way I'd learned to with work. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to London. The sky outside the window was painted in hues of pale gold and violet, and I couldn't help smiling. I was flying across the Atlantic to speak about the same degree people once mocked. When the plane landed, a driver holding a sign with my name whisked me away to the venue, a grand old building overlooking the Thames. The conference hall inside looked like something out of a movie: marble floors, glass ceilings, banners with my name printed beside the words "Creativity as Legacy." That night, as I reviewed my speech, I thought of my family. I hadn't heard from Ryan since the ceremony, though Mom occasionally sent short texts, photos of the grandkids, updates about Dad's health, little things. Each time, I replied warmly, keeping the peace but not reopening the wound. Dad had started sending messages too. Short, simple ones. "Saw your campaign ad on TV. Good work. Your mother says hi. Proud of you." Small sentences, big meaning. I didn't need more. The next morning, I stood backstage as the summit's director adjusted my mic. My palms were sweaty, though I'd given speeches countless times. But this felt different. It wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about representing every artist who'd been told their dream wasn't worth it. When they called my name, the applause rolled like thunder. "Thank you," I began, smiling out at the sea of faces from dozens of countries. When I was 22, my family told me my art degree was pointless. They said it would never feed me, never mean anything. And for a while I believed them. But today, standing here, I know they were wrong, not because of this stage or this spotlight, but because art in all its forms feeds the soul of the world. I spoke about the quiet power of creativity, about resilience, about how failure is sometimes just a misunderstood beginning. I told them how I'd been humiliated, dismissed, and underestimated, and how those moments became the brushstrokes of my purpose. When I finished, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. I saw tears on faces, hands clapping until it hurt. For a moment, I didn't see strangers. I saw my younger self. Afterward, a man in his 60s approached me. "Ms. Donovan, I'm the director of the Global Mentorship Initiative. We'd be honored if you joined us permanently as our creative ambassador." The title sounded impressive. The salary was astronomical. The role would mean global travel, international exposure, and less time for actual creation. "Think about it," he said, handing me a sleek envelope. "People follow you because of your authenticity. You could inspire millions." That night, I sat in the hotel lobby staring at the envelope, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. It felt like the ultimate validation. And yet, something about it didn't sit right. If I accepted, I'd be the face of a global brand. But I'd have to give up the small, personal work, the art that had saved me in the first place. I thought of my students, the kids back at the community center, the girl who once asked me if she should give up painting. I thought of what success had felt like before, the pure joy of creating something real, something that mattered, not something that sold. Was I ready to trade meaning for magnitude? I didn't sleep that night. When morning came, I decided to clear my head with a walk along the river. The air was damp and crisp, the city alive with motion. I passed a group of street artists painting a mural under a bridge. Their work was raw, messy, electric. One of them, a young woman in a red beanie, caught me watching and waved. "Want to try a stroke?" she called. I hesitated, then laughed. "It's been a while." She handed me a can of spray paint. "Art never forgets you." Something about that line hit me hard. I pressed the nozzle and watched the color bloom against the concrete, bright turquoise, smooth and alive. A shiver ran through me, the same thrill I'd felt years ago when I first touched a brush. I'd missed this, the quiet dialogue between the soul and the surface. When I stepped back, the woman smiled. "You've done this before." "Yeah," I said softly. "A lifetime ago." Back at the hotel, I called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, how's London?" "Beautiful," I said. "And confusing." "Confusing how?" I hesitated, then sighed. They offered me something big. Global work, leadership, all the prestige. But I don't know. It feels like stepping away from the thing I love most. There was a pause. Then Mom said something that surprised me. "Honey, success is only worth it if it feels like peace. If it starts feeling like noise again, walk away." I closed my eyes, smiling faintly. "You sound like my old professor." "Maybe he was right," she said. "Maybe the world doesn't need more people who climb higher. It needs more people who create something real where they stand." I laughed softly. "You've changed, Mom." "So have you," she said. "But don't lose the girl who started it all. The one who just wanted to make something beautiful." That night, I wrote my answer to the Global Foundation. "Dear Mr. Harlan, thank you for the offer. I'm deeply honored, but I must decline. I believe my work belongs closer to the ground, where art meets real people, not conference stages. I hope you understand. With gratitude, Claire Donovan." When I hit send, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I didn't need to be everywhere. I just needed to be true. A few weeks later, I returned to New York. My studio was waiting, filled with the quiet hum of unfinished projects and the faint smell of paint and coffee. Nora looked at me expectantly as I walked in. "So," she asked, "are we moving to London?" I smiled.
No.
"We're staying right here." She looked surprised, then nodded. "Good. Because the community art program you started just got approved for city funding. Looks like we're going global from home." I laughed. "Perfect." We celebrated that night with takeout and music. As I looked around at the small team I'd built, artists, interns, dreamers, I realized this was the empire I wanted. Not marble halls or spotlights, but connection. The kind that could outlast applause. Later that week, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo from the Global Summit, a candid shot of me laughing on stage. Beneath it, someone had written in marker, "The ones who mocked you will remember your silence longer than your words." There was no signature, but I had a feeling it came from one of my London ments. I set it on my shelf beside the award, my brushes, and a tiny framed print of my first ever painting, the one my father once called childish. Now, it looked timeless. That night, as I sat by the window, city lights blinking like stars below, I thought about everything that had happened. The ridicule, the heartbreak, the triumph, the temptation. If the younger me could see this life now, she'd cry. Not out of pride, but out of relief. Relief that all her pain had turned into purpose. And maybe that's what outranking really means, not standing above others, but standing firm in who you are when the world tries to bend you. I smiled, picked up my brush, and began painting again. No deadlines, no clients, no speeches, just color, silence, and peace. The world could keep its applause. I had found my meaning. 6 months passed since the London summit, and life settled into a rhythm that felt honest. My days were filled with projects that mattered: community murals, charity collaborations, mentorship workshops, and an ever-growing art program that helped underfunded schools rebuild their creative spaces. Every morning, I woke up before dawn, brewed my coffee, and stood by my studio window watching the city stir to life. For once, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I'd already caught what I needed: peace. One Tuesday morning, as I was reviewing design drafts for a local youth art campaign, Nora peeked into my office. "You've got a visitor," she said. I frowned. "A client?" She shook her head. "He didn't say. But he looks like he's from home." I froze. Home. When I walked out to the reception area, I stopped short. Standing there, looking slightly out of place among the sleek walls and framed art, was Ryan. He was older than I remembered, his hair shorter, his posture less cocky. There were lines around his eyes, and a heaviness in the way he held himself. Hey, sis, he said, forcing a smile. I took a slow breath. Ryan, this is unexpected. Yeah, he said. Mind if I sit? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Go ahead. He sat, glancing around the office. Nice place. You've done well. Thanks. I waited. What brings you here? He hesitated, fingers tapping his knee. I'm in town for conference.
Construction expo thing.
Thought I'd stop by. I crossed my arms. After 6 years? He looked down, sighing.
Yeah. Guess that sounds bad.
Depends on why you're here, I said. He gave a soft laugh, the old defensiveness flickering for a moment before fading. I saw your speech again. The one from the university. It popped up on YouTube last month. I watched it twice. I stayed quiet. He went on, voice low. You said something about people who measure others with their own rulers. That hit me. Harder than I expected. I tilted my head. Why? He shrugged, eyes distant. Because that's what I did. My whole life. I thought success was just money and numbers and winning. You know? But watching you, hearing you talk about what you built, what it means, I realized I've spent years building things that don't mean anything at all. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with quiet humility instead of pride. I leaned forward slightly. Ryan, you don't have to. He cut me off. I do. You were right, Claire.
You were always right.
Dad and we mocked what we didn't understand. And maybe we were scared. You had courage we didn't. The words hung between us, fragile as glass. He rubbed his hands together. I wanted to say I'm sorry.
For everything.
For laughing at you. For making you feel small. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the brother I'd loved as a kid, not the man who once sneered at my dreams. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you think. He nodded, swallowing hard. Mom told me about your youth program, that you're expanding it nationwide. I am, I said. We just got federal funding last week. That's amazing, he said genuinely. You did what none of us thought possible. I smiled faintly. I didn't do it to prove you wrong. He met my eyes. I know. That's why it worked. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long while, staring out the window. Forgiveness, it turned out, didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like exhaling after holding your breath for years. That evening, my mom called. Your brother said he saw you, she said, voice warm. He said it went well. It did, I said. I'm glad, she whispered. You've given this family more grace than we deserved. Mom. No, listen, she interrupted gently. You taught us something, Claire. We spent years thinking success meant control. But you built something out of love. Out of faith. That's bigger than any company. I felt tears burn my eyes. Thanks, Mom. Your dad's been painting lately, she said suddenly. I blinked.
Dad.
Yeah, she said with a small laugh. He joined a senior art class at the community center. Says it helps him relax. I smiled, so wide it hurt. You're kidding. Nope. He even painted the barn last week, though he calls it a modern interpretation of resilience. We both laughed until we couldn't breathe. When the laughter faded, Mom said softly, You changed us, honey. All of us. You didn't just prove your point. You opened our eyes. And that, I realized, was the real victory. 3 months later, I received an invitation to curate a national exhibition titled The Art of Purpose. It would showcase works from artists who turned personal pain into creative power. The organizers wanted my mentorship program to be featured, and for me to close the show with a personal installation. For days, I thought about what to create. I didn't want to make something grand or self-congratulatory. I wanted something true. Then one night, it came to me. I called a few of my ments, gathered supplies, and we began working. For weeks, we built it piece by piece, a towering sculpture made of old wooden rulers, splintered brushes, torn sketches, and broken picture frames. In the center stood a single light, soft and golden. The piece was titled Measured Wrong. On the night of the exhibition, the hall was filled with artists, critics, and press. But my favorite guests were my parents. They stood hand in hand, looking up at the sculpture with tears in their eyes. Dad turned to me. "You made this." "We all did," I said, nodding toward the students who'd helped. "It's about how the world measures us the wrong way sometimes." He studied it for a long moment, then whispered, "Then maybe it's time we change the ruler." I felt my throat tighten. "I think we already have." The next day, while packing up materials, I found Ryan waiting near the gallery entrance. He had a small box in his hands. "What's this?" I asked. He handed it to me awkwardly. "Something Dad wanted you to have. Said it was yours all along." Inside was an old, weathered wooden box of oil paints. My first set, the ones I'd begged for when I was 13. The same ones Dad had thrown into the garage years ago when he told me to get serious. I ran my fingers over the cracked lids, the faint smell of turpentine still lingering. "He found it when cleaning the shed," Ryan said. "He kept it all these years." I couldn't stop the tears. "Thank you." Ryan smiled. "Guess he finally learned what beauty pays for." I laughed through the tears. "Yeah, peace of mind." That evening, after everyone left, I stayed in the empty gallery. The lights were dimmed, the silence soft. I stood in front of the sculpture, tracing the glow at its core. For a moment, I thought about the long road that led here, the loneliness of being misunderstood, the sting of mockery, the nights of doubt. Every wound had become a line in my story, every scar a brushstroke in the masterpiece I hadn't known I was painting. And now, standing here, I finally understood. They hadn't been villains. They'd been mirrors reflecting their own fears. And I had simply chosen to step out of their reflection. When I returned home that night, I took out the old paint box and placed it on my studio shelf beside my award and the framed mural photo from London. 3 objects, 3 eras, 1 truth. Everything had meaning in the end. I pulled out a fresh canvas, squeezed a line of paint across the palette, and began a new piece. Not for a gallery, not for an audience, just for me. The colors danced, bright and alive, telling a story I no longer needed to explain. As I painted, I whispered into the quiet room. "You mocked my degree, but it taught me to create. You measured my worth, but I learned to redefine it. And now," I smiled, "now I don't need to outrank anyone." The brush moved smoothly across the canvas, steady and free. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night, and I felt something deep and simple rise in my chest, gratitude. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living right. 15 years later, the world outside my studio window was quieter than it used to be. Or maybe I had just learned to listen differently. The rush of cars, the echo of the city, the hum of life, they didn't feel chaotic anymore. They felt like rhythm. At 43, I still painted every morning. Some days it was for gallery commissions, some for my foundation, and some just for me. The paint stains on my hands had become my favorite jewelry, proof that I was still building, still breathing through color. The Whitestone Youth Arts Initiative, the mentorship program I had started on a whim, had now become a national movement. Dozens of cities had adopted the model: free creative workshops for children who couldn't afford lessons, grants for young artists from low-income families, scholarships for design students. We even had an annual festival called The Art of Becoming, where alumni displayed their work alongside professionals. Every year, I stood backstage watching them, the once shy kids who now stood confidently beside their murals, their sculptures, their digital pieces, and I thought this was what all of it was for. One of those artists, a girl named Elena, reminded me of myself at 20. She'd joined the program at 16, sketching on napkins because her parents couldn't afford art supplies. Now she was graduating from Parsons with a full scholarship. One afternoon, she dropped by my studio, clutching a folder of her final project. "I want you to be the first to see it," she said, eyes shining. When she opened the folder, I froze. It was a concept for a public art installation, a massive, collaborative mural called Measured Wrong. inspired by my exhibition years ago. You're bringing it back, I said softly. She smiled. No, we are. I want to include every kid from the mentorship program. Each one paints a panel about what people once told them they couldn't do. I couldn't speak for a moment. The lump in my throat felt like gratitude and pride rolled into one. You don't need my approval, I finally said. But you have it anyway.
She grinned.
Then I'll make you proud.
You already have, I said.
That evening, after she left, I sat in the quiet and looked around the studio. The shelves were lined with memories, awards, photos, letters from students, and that same old wooden paint box from my father. The lids were cracked now, the labels faded, but I'd never replaced it. It reminded me where I came from. Next to it sat a small frame, a photo from years ago of my family and me standing in front of Measured Wrong. It was the first event we'd all attended together without tension. Dad had passed away 3 years after that night. He'd spent his final years painting in the barn behind their house. When I went through his things, I found stacks of canvases, landscapes, portraits, even one of me as a child, holding a paintbrush. On the back, in his shaky handwriting, he'd written, "For the one who saw before I did." I remember crying so hard I couldn't stand. But it wasn't grief, it was gratitude. Now, as the years had settled into a kind of golden calm, I realized that life had stopped being about proving anything. It was about passing it forward. That's why, when the University of Chicago reached out again, this time to name a new art scholarship after me, I said yes, but only on one condition. It has to be for the dreamers who were told they'd fail, I told them. The ones who feel like their path isn't practical enough.
The dean laughed.
I think that's perfect, Ms. Donovan. No, I corrected with a smile. It's Claire. The day of the scholarship announcement, I returned to campus for the first time in over a decade. The auditorium was filled with students, young, nervous, hopeful, just like I once was. When I stepped up to the podium, I didn't have a prepared speech. I didn't need one. I used to sit where you're sitting, I said. I used to think the world was too big, and I was too small. I was told my degree was pointless, that my art would never matter. But life has a way of proving that the smallest brushstroke can still change the picture. I paused, smiling at their faces. You don't have to chase validation. You just have to keep creating. Because when you make something from truth, something that carries a piece of you, it will outlast every voice that ever tried to silence it. The applause was soft but sincere. Afterward, as students came up to thank me, I saw my younger self in all of them, wide-eyed, scared, and secretly unstoppable. Later that afternoon, I drove back to the neighborhood where I grew up. My parents' old house still stood, though Ryan lived there now with his wife and 2 teenage daughters. When I parked in the driveway, his oldest, Sophie, came running out. She was 16, freckles across her nose, paint smudged on her sweatshirt. "Aunt Claire," she shouted. "Dad said you'd come." I laughed, hugging her. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to the smears of blue on her sleeve.
"Art project," she said proudly.
"I'm painting the school's hallway mural." "Well," I said, smiling, "I guess it runs in the family." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Dad said you'd say that." Ryan came out then, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd built a new porch, painted the shutters white. "Hey, Claire," he said, grinning. "She's been waiting all day." "I can tell," I said. He leaned against the railing. "You know, I still remember the night I called your degree pointless." "So do I." He smiled faintly. "You ever going to let me live that down?" "I already did," I said. "You just haven't forgiven yourself yet." He chuckled softly. "Maybe not. But watching Sophie paint, I get it now. I see how happy she is. And I see you in her." I glanced toward the yard where she was setting up her easel. "Then I think we're both lucky." We stood there a while in comfortable silence. Before I left, Ryan handed me a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. "Something Dad painted before he passed," he said quietly. "I think he wanted you to have it." When I got home and unwrapped it, I gasped. It was a simple painting, just a figure standing on a hill, brush in hand, looking out over a bright horizon. The caption at the bottom read, "Pointless, no more." I pressed the canvas to my chest and laughed through my tears. Months later, the new mural project led by Elena launched in Chicago. Hundreds of students gathered to paint together, each panel a story of resilience and belief. They asked me to attend the unveiling, but I told them no. "It's your moment," I said. "You don't need me there to make it real." Still, when the photos arrived later, I stayed up half the night looking at them, faces full of color and pride, the wall blazing with words like persistence, courage, voice, faith. And right at the center, painted in bold blue letters, "Create anyway." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. It was the phrase I'd written in my journal years ago after that humiliating dinner, the night everything fell apart. Now, it was part of a public mural that stretched across city blocks. That winter, I held my first solo exhibition in nearly a decade. The title, The Long Canvas. It was a collection of paintings chronicling my journey, every emotion, every lesson. On opening night, as guests filled the room, I walked quietly among them. There were pieces of every chapter, the loneliness, the rise, the forgiveness. But at the end of the exhibit stood one final painting, larger than the rest. It showed a young woman sitting at a dinner table surrounded by blurred faces, laughter frozen mid-motion. She sat quietly, looking down at her sketchbook, her hands steady. The caption read, "This is where it started." People lingered before it, silent. Some wept. Others just nodded in understanding. A journalist later asked me, "Is this painting about revenge? About proving them wrong?" I smiled.
No.
It's about remembering who you were before they told you who to be. When the exhibition closed, I returned to my studio and painted one last canvas, just for me. No galleries, no press releases. It was a portrait of my hands, aged, lined, still dusted with paint. Around them, I painted faint echoes of all the people who'd shaped my journey, my parents, my brother, my students, my younger self. When it was done, I wrote 3 words in small script at the bottom corner. Art is forgiveness. Because that's what it had become. Not rebellion. Not revenge. Not validation. Forgiveness. Forgiveness for them, for not understanding. Forgiveness for myself, for trying so long to make them. And as the last brushstroke dried, I whispered to the quiet room. They mocked my degree. But they didn't know it was never about the degree. It was about the courage to keep creating when no one believed I should. I leaned back, watching the colors blend together one final time. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, forgiving. I closed my eyes, smiled, and whispered to the girl I once was. "You outranked them all. And not because you won, but because you became."